So we all know why we're here. We're on the eve of the centenary of Betty Mckinnon. It's not her birthday today. Her birthday's a few days further on into May, but we're having this specially today. Betty, you have achieved what none of us have yet. So how do you feel?
Amazed. I never expected to get here. Never.
So that's excellent. Before I start with Betty and preparing for today and talking with her for many hours, I realised what a most remarkable woman she has had. Now, most of us through our lifetime can remember lots of things and how things have changed and how rapidly things have changed over time. But if you add the extra, whatever age you are, add the extra years to get to 100 and think about how much more Betty has seen and experienced. You know, we think back to days when we didn't have running water, we didn't have electricity, we had the old dunny down the back, all those awful things. So, and I've been spending a few hours with Betty, and the more I've talked to her, the more I've come to love her and appreciate exactly what a wonderful woman you are.
Thank you.
So, I want to set the scene of other momentous occurrences in the year that Betty was born, 1922. Some are sad, some are funny, and some are just amazing. There was the passing of the bush poet Henry Lawson, Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton, and inventor Alexander Graham Bell. The plan for Sydney Harbour Bridge was finally approved. A big one, the Country Women's Association was formed in Australia, and I'm sure you're hearing about that. I was listening to a lady talking about things the other day, so 100 years old. Who liked Tarzan? Record-breaking swimmer Johnny Weissmuller prepared for Tarzan movies in 1922. Those movies weren't shown until the 1930s, but he started preparing in 1922. This one's very pertinent to what's happening today with Russia and Ukraine. The inaugural session of the Permanent Court of International Justice was held in The Hague. This was the predecessor of the International Court of Justice, which still has its seat in The Hague today and is the principal judicial organ for the United Nations. And we all hope that's where somebody called Putin ends up. Now, a good one. The BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, began radio service in the United Kingdom. Interesting, this I find very interesting. Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia all came together to form the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which is exactly what Mr. Putin wants today. But the most important thing, apart from Betty being born, was Vegemite. And it was invented by an Australian entrepreneur called Fred Walker. So there we go, 100 years of Vegemite.
Vegemite. Good stuff.
Now, Betty, you had a really interesting entry into the world as Beatrice Scott. So tell us about your parents and the siblings you never knew.
Well, my mother had 3 before me by about 8 years, and she was told she would never have any more because she had malformation of the womb. So nobody was worrying about it when she had, I think I'm a change of life, baby. I think I must be. Because nobody expected me. And when I did arrive, I was supposed to be a boy from So I learned to climb trees and do all the things boys did and got reward from it. But it just continued on, because as far as I'm concerned, the nearest relative I would have would be 8 years older than me. So there's nobody left, and then Bob and me.
Your 3 siblings, though, they didn't survive, did they?
No.
So 2 of them died at...
But about 2 days.
2 days?
One was born already dead, and the other 2 only lasted for about 2 days.
And the third one, 6 months? Yes. So it's interesting that here she is 100 years later, and she wasn't expected to survive because of what the mother had experienced. And it was interesting when I was listening to this new president of the CWA, She said, in the time of the World War I, as many babies died in Australia as men died on the battlefield. And I was quite stunned by that, and having talked to Betty about her 3 siblings passing away so quickly or even at birth, I thought that was really interesting. So this is a great survivor. Okay. A few months after you were born, you moved with the family to Coogee. Tell us about how your parents chose to be there and the houses that you lived in.
Oh, well, we went there because my father's, one of his sisters' husband was killed during the war, and she had a block, well, he had bought a block of land at Coogee, and Dad knew he couldn't afford to keep it, so he bought it off her. Years later, he needed to get the other block, which was on the corner, to get his car in and out of the garage. And one of the, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the cooks from Melbourne, you know, the big shops, he owned the block of land. And when Dad rang him, he said, "Live there? No, mate, it's too damn quiet for me." So Dad got the block of land and built another house and got his garage in the back. And we stayed there till, after I was married.
And Dad built his own houses?
Well, Dad had the 2 houses.
Yeah.
It's what he called the little house and the big house. They were 2 blocks together.
So that was really interesting. So at some stage during that, you went up to the Blue Mountains. Tell us about that.
Well, that was for a couple of years because I had a bad chest, and I suppose in those days I didn't realise it was asthma, but it was. And when we got up there, I and the trees got together and we loved each other. I was fantastic and Mum was terrible. It didn't feel her any good at all, so we could only stay for a couple of years, but in that 2 years I really got a lot of good health out of it.
And you went to school there, you went to Glendale School, which, how many Glenbrook School, how many teachers?
2.
2 teachers. And how did you get there?
Walked.
Why did you walk? Dad had a car. You said her dad always, as long as she could remember, her father always had a car. Now you think back 100 years ago, that was a big deal, really a big deal.
He had the car, but he still thought you should walk. That's what you had your legs for. The snakes, oh, it was always snakes. So Dad would come down and make sure that the snakes were away, so he'd always find a couple and kill them, and when we came back from school he'd take us over and the ads had done a really good job. There wouldn't be too much of the snakes left in those days, but there were a lot.
Okay. Now while you were there at Glenbrook School, something happened. You were playing rounders. What happened?
Oh,
this is amazing.
I had to wear leather shoes because I had weak ankles. And I used to play a lot of rounders.
Rounders is softball.
And this particular day, one of my feet caught on a little piece of the tree, and it rolled, and it threw me onto the tin of the toilet. The toilets were no tin and concrete drainage, and I hit the drain, and I cracked my kidney. I was in hospital for nearly 2 years with a kidney, and I grew 5 inches.
The interesting part of that, when I talked to Betty, not only was she was in a hospital in an adult ward, completely sandbagged for 2 years. So you can imagine a child. How old were you? About 7?
Oh, about 9.
9, okay, bit older. Imagine a child being left to lie in sandbags for 2 years, not allowed to move, not allowed to get up, all the things that have to be done.
There was no children's hospital either. It was, just an ordinary hospital.
Yeah, and then she grew 5 inches. So, and she's still here because they thought that one of her kidneys had been severed. And of course back then, what else do you do except keep somebody still and hope that it grows back again, I guess. I don't know. So you went through junior school and you graduated. Where did you go after junior school?
Junior school, I went down to back to Coogee, finished off at Randwick, and went to the, where you do the typing, Metropolitan Business College.
Okay. Okay, so Betty's results, she was a really smart cookie, and her results were good enough for her to go to Sydney High School, where she could have learnt languages. But for whatever reason, her parents didn't want her to learn languages, even though her father spoke 7 languages and her mother spoke 9. But they didn't want her to learn any because it wasn't necessary, because she was just a girl.
Yeah. You'll get married somewhat.
So her mother decided that she would go to Randwick to the domestic science school. What happened after you achieved your intermediate certificate? You wanted to go to university, but again they wouldn't let you because you were just a girl and you didn't need an education. So then you went to Metropolitan Business College.
Yep.
And did stenography.
Yep.
Very good, and got stenography qualifications. Where did that take you? What sort of companies did you work in?
Insurance. There's a group of 10 insurance companies. I went into the biggest one to start with, and many years later when the children were older and I went back to work, I went into one of their subsidiary ones, and they were both really good places to work. We had a wonderful time.
And again, that's unusual because Betty worked, and I can remember when I was engaged, going to the bank to get a loan to buy a block of land, they wouldn't take into consideration my wage. Because you're just a woman, you're going to get married and have babies, and you're not allowed to work after you get married. Well, I wasn't going to do that, neither was she. So Betty continued to work after she got married, and then when the children grew up, you went back to work. Didn't you go to work one day a week when the children were young?
Yes, one day a week, whichever day I could go, and they used to keep something for me to do, which was wonderful. I'd work from 10, and take the kids to school, get there at 10, finish up back at 2 o'clock, pick the kids up to go home. And then, you know, it was great. You can't do those things anymore.
But again, that says to me how valued she was, because in those days they wouldn't bother to make that opportunity available. So that tells me that she was a very valued person. So she was strong, she was confident, and obviously very, very capable. So we're going to go back a little bit to what your father did for a living. And you talked to me about ships and dinners and all sorts of things. So tell me about Dad and the ships and dinners.
Dad was a chief steward on the ships, on the Venezuela boats. And he was torpedoed 4 times and got over them, which was wonderful.
And why did you go to dinner on the boats?
Sorry?
Why did you go to dinner on the boats?
Well, every time they came in, at the last night they were in, we were all invited, families were invited down to have dinner with their various people until that night.
Oh, that was nice.
It was lovely. And it was where we first got Chinese meals.
Ah, there you go. It's her fault, we've all got Chinese. And Dad was in the army?
Yes.
Yeah.
Twice.
Oh.
I don't know how he did it. He was in the First World War and he got himself into the Second World War. When he was about 60 odd, he joined up again.
Wow.
And then he got himself torpedoed.
Yeah, we'll talk about
off our coast.
Off our coast, yeah. And that was because he was helping out a mate. And here's the boat here behind us. It was called the SS Iron Crown. Tell us how he came to help out that friend.
Well, George came down to us one night and said to Dad was in the army at that stage, I'd really appreciate it if you could give me your company for a trip. Could you manage to get off for a week? So Dad asked because he loved the sea, and he did. And I put him on the ship, on the train rather, to go to Newcastle. It was the last time I saw him.
So it's really interesting. The SS Iron Crown was a World War II shipwreck, and it was found recently off Australia. It was at the entrance to Port Phillip Bay, and it was torpedoed. And only 5 people survived. And just like last week, there was a story about this.
Yes.
Last week, just amazing. The sad part was that Betty and her family were never officially advised of Dad's demise. They had to read about it in the paper. So that was very sad. But it's really very interesting that this naval freight ship was hit by a torpedo off the state of Victoria in 1942, killing 38 people. There were 5 survivors. The ship sank within 60 seconds of the attack, and they call it an event of national significance. But it was really interesting and coincidental that we were talking to her about this, and they found the wreckage.
Yes.
So really quite amazing. Now I want you to tell us about your dad and cars and joy flights. Tell me about the joy, or tell them about the joy flights. I thought this was fascinating. You all know what a tiger moth is, don't you?
Well, my dad always had a car. We were very fortunate in that respect. In those days you had to have your car lights on at night because of the batteries. But what else did you want?
Well, tell us about the joy flights. Didn't you go flying with your dad?
Oh yes, Dad loved flying. When he was in New Guinea, he used to always go flying with Ray Pera. And when he got down to Sydney, he and I used to go to Mascot. In those days it was a Chinese vegetable garden. And we'd get on one of these single aeroplanes, and I'd sit on his lap, and off we'd go. And
So you can imagine a tiger moth, open, Dad, kid on the knee, and off we go.
And nobody ever thought about putting a hat on me. So by the time we got back, my hair was just knots. So my mother used to just get the scissors and rip them off.
Now, Mum,
She's
she's still got hair, that's good. Mum was part Armenian, your grandmother being Armenian and the grandfather English, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And she was born in Tehran. Did she have any funny little quirks?
Oh yes, she was a strange lady in a lot of ways. One of her worst ones, I suppose, was she always had a revolver under a pillow. I was told never to touch it because being a kid I had to touch it. I used to hop into bed with her and just stick the finger up and touch the thing. It was very cold actually.
And Mum loved gambling and horses, so that's where our new inductees who like gambling and horses. So that's interesting as well. Now, you were a bit of a party girl, you enjoyed dances, you made all your own dresses, you even wore a daring swimsuit. And you were on the front page of the newspaper when you were just 16. Here it is. And at home, she's actually got the framed picture of it, which I think Alan Shepherd did for her. And so tell us about how you got to be on the front page of the paper and what your dad's reaction to that was.
Well, my girlfriend and I, it was August actually, and she lived over at Bondi, so it was a good day, so we thought we'd go down the beach, not to go in the water so much, just to go down the beach. And the two of us were down there, and this fellow came up to us and said, could he take our photo? Well, we'd always been told to watch out for blokes, you know, in case they were doing the wrong thing. But he was quite all right, and he took the photos. And when it came out, I came out on the front page and she came out on the third page. So when I showed them to Dad and Mum, Dad went straight up to the shop where we had all our papers, bought the lot and tore them up. A friend of ours recently, Alan, he's here, he did a wonderful job. He found them in, I think it was Canberra, and he had it framed for me, which was wonderful.
So that's very nice. Good. Okay, we're going to move on now. You became engaged, and then your eye took another fella. Tell us all about Ian and marrying Ian.
Well, I was engaged to my girlfriend's brother, actually, and everything was going on nicely, and then Ian appeared. And he tells me straight out that he was going to marry me. There was no point in fiddling around because he found that he didn't think that Arthur was good enough for me. He didn't think it. So he got into it, and finally he proved he was quite right. We got married, and we were married for nearly 70 years. We were married for 71 years.
Yeah, he only passed away recently at age 97. We have a photo. There they are there. Isn't she beautiful? So that's really nice. Yeah. Now we all know about Bob, but did you have any other children?
Yes, I had a daughter, Lynn. Unfortunately, we lost her about 4 years ago to cancer, as usual. And she had 2 sons, and I've got 2 grandsons. But other than that, I've got no relatives, of course, because I was 8 years younger than my youngest cousin, so there's nobody left. Just me.
So Betty's got 2 grandsons and now 2 great-grandsons. Yes. So that's really good. Now your dad always had a car, a Buick. How did you learn to drive? Tell me what happened when you were about 12.
Oh, Dad came to me one morning, Sunday morning. He said, would you like to come down to Kingsford with me? We get some petrol for the car. He always had a car. And I said, oh yeah, right. So we got in the car, we go down to Kingsford, he got the petrol. And when he got back, he opened my door, and he started getting things out of the glove box. And he said, move over. So I moved over. And he said, no, move over a bit further. So I'm in the driver's seat. I'm 12 years old. He said, right, take me home.
That's how you learn to drive when you're 12.
I said, you want me to drive? He said, well, you've been watching me long enough, you should know how to do it.
And that would have been 4 on the floor? That would have been 4 on the floor?
Yes.
Yeah. Easy for a 12-year-old. You must have been so big too.
So that was my first lesson. From then on, he wasn't interested. I'd done it, so it was it.
But tell me, didn't he make you...
My mother opened the gates when we got to home, saw me in the chair and said, my God, what's happened to your father? Nothing. I got out of the car, we had a thing, you know, you put your feet on.
A step.
I sat on that and I could not get up. I just remember that I was just so shocked that I got there. And that was it.
And then, tell me about having to change the tyre before you could go for your licence.
Oh yeah, that was both him and Dad. They were both as bad as one another as far as cars were concerned. I had to learn how to change a tyre in the backyard before I was allowed to talk. And I had to do that.
Now the interesting thing about that is Betty only relinquished her licence a few years ago, didn't she? So she went, how many of you can say that you drove for 70 years without any penalties? Pretty good record.
Thank you.
So you came to Foster partly because Dad liked fishing here, and then you and Ian came here holidaying. So tell us how that changed, and then you came to live in our paradise. How did you come to live in Foster?
Well, we just loved it. You know, like when we coming through here, we'd be going to Queensland quite a bit. We had relatives up there, and we'd stop here too. So we just got to the stage and we were looking for somewhere to live, and we went all around Sydney and around the south coast, and everyone said, looks like Foster. I said, well, that's pretty good. So here we are. And I've been here now nearly 40 years.
And coming to Foster gave you lots of opportunities to do some of the things you always loved to do. Now, here we are here. This is really interesting. Tell us about the art side of your life.
Well, I wasn't allowed to do anything at home. My mother didn't believe in people doing just art. It was something, I don't know why, but she always thought all artists were weird. Maybe I am, but when I started up here, Ian said, you know, go for it. And I said, well, I don't know what I can do a lot. He said, we'll soon find out, won't we? And it's been very successful. I've been very lucky.
Now, I understand that you were the president of the Art Society when the Art Society was operating out of council chambers.
Yeah, well, we actually got it going. We used to have one night a week at the council chambers to have our meetings and whatever we wanted to do. But we had nowhere to put anything. Everybody had to take things home and put them in their garages and what have you. We never had enough stuff. So finally, I talked the council into giving us the room where we are now. And then they said, well, you can't have it on your own, so you've got to have someone with you. And they decided the Bridge Club was a good idea to start, and so they came to the other half. And we've had a very successful time. I think it's getting close to nearly 40 years we've been up there. And it's grown. We had nearly 200 members. We did everything. We used to go for bus trips and do everything. We had to collect all our own money in those days. You wanted anything, you had to get out there and do it. And we had a very successful crew of people to help me. And there she is. She's doing her head very well nowadays. Finally, people have found us. They said they have people come in. We used to sit there for weekends and never see a soul. Now we've got people coming in and buying things, and it's wonderful. So if you've got any time, go and have a look, because we've got a very good exhibition up there at the moment. We've got over 300 paintings, and it's terrific.
So Betty's still involved, and she was honoured with 2 awards for her very special services to art in the Great Lakes area and Taree, or now we would call it Barrington Coast. And she got, in 2001, she received a Commonwealth Award to Senior Australians for service to the community. And in 2003, the Centenary of Federation Medal for service to art through the Great Lakes Art Society. So you have to do a lot to get those sorts of awards, so that was really good. But you were a very good artist, as I understand, that you exhibited in Australia, London, Paris and New York. Is that right? Wow. And then you also had some other skills and talents. Tell us what sports you did.
Tennis.
Tennis? What else?
Golf.
Golf?
Not so good at golf as it was at tennis.
Yeah. And what about tennis?
Oh, the tennis, Dolly loved it.
She was just a state champion, so she really did love it.
We were the champions of the whole state in tennis bowling. We played at White City. It was some years back, but it was really great. A lot of skills needed. You don't just pick it up and chuck it.
And what about horse riding? Did you do horse riding too? Horse riding?
Oh, riding? Yeah, I like riding. But I had to find somebody's horse to ride it.
Oh. Now, the other thing is that you were accomplished with as a pianist, which is obviously where Bob gets his talents. Every time I've gone around to their home, Bob's out the back playing this magnificent organ. Sometimes I stand outside and listen before I knock on the door. Did he get his talents from you? Were you a good pianist? Was she a good pianist, Bob?
She was very good.
Very good, okay. Dressmaker? Clothes designer? She's just nodding here. Restoring and redecorating old houses? Anything else that you can... Is that enough?
Didn't have much more time.
Didn't have much more time, okay. Now, you and Ian travelled extensively. Were there any favourite places or journeys? Any favourite places for you and Ian?
London. Love London. Absolutely thought it was something we never realised and believed could exist. Sorry. Yeah.
Did you go to Europe?
Yes, we did.
Did you like Europe?
Yes, I liked it very much, but I still preferred London.
And did you ever visit Bob when he was an airline captain?
Yep.
What places did you visit him?
Sorry?
Where did you go to visit Bob?
Oh, up to New Guinea.
Ah.
He was up there for a long time. And my mother wouldn't go to New Guinea. I don't know why my father did. He went there for many years. And for some silly reason, I used to have to lecture at school about New Guinea, and I'd never been there. But that didn't matter. So when I went there, I was really interested. And it's a lovely spot, it really is. Beautiful scenery.
And did you go to Townsville or Cairns or any of those other places?
Yeah, all of those.
All of those. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay. Betty's had congratulations, and they're all up here. First of all, this beautiful, beautiful presentation here which says, congratulations, Beatrice May Mckinnon, on celebrating your 100 years on the 19th of May 1922 to 2022. This is also 22 carat gold. And this was made by Gabby Mckinnon, so who I think some people should know, who's a very good friend.
She does beautiful work.
Beautiful calligraphy, just lovely. Now, she also got, as you can see here, and that proof is here on the stage, congratulations from the Queen. So we don't get a telegram anymore. So we have congratulations from the Queen. She actually got 2 congratulations from the Governor-General. So that came twice. The Prime Minister, the Premier of New South Wales, and the local state member, Stephen Bromhead. So plenty of congratulations. I also need to tell you that there's going to be a profile of Betty in the next edition of the Foster Fortnightly. That's the free newspaper that you can get, and it's the next edition to coincide with the 19th of May. So there'll be a whole profile and a lot more information than we're going through today. Because the lady came out and spent quite a bit of time interviewing you, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
Yeah. So
very nice lady.
Nice lady, so that's very good. I'm going to ask you the question that everybody will ask, and you may not be able to answer it. What's the secret of longevity?
I wish I knew. Ian and I said if we got to be about 86, that'd be pretty good. And it just crept on from there. He ended up being 1 month off 97 when he passed away. And here's me, I'm still here. I don't know for how long.
So that's fine. Betty said she was happy to take questions from anybody, if anybody has any questions. You think back to your time, think back to all the different things. What's the thing, the biggest change that you saw that really had an impact on? Like I talked about, you know, we didn't have running water, we didn't have electricity, we had the old dunny down the back. What was the most important, biggest change for you?
It's very hard to answer, really. I really and honestly don't know. You just accept it all as you go. You can't do anything else, can you?
So any questions?
Hanging on the latest jazz on computers and that. At your age, have you taken them under your wing and conquered computers?
Well, I was the first one to be taught the computer from the Herald for the classified ads. I haven't had anything to do with them for a long time now because Bob's got the lock, so soon it
Move over, Bob, and let her in.
Things have changed quite a bit too since the first one. They were like bridges.
Huge, weren't they? Any other questions? Anything you remember? No? Yes, here's a question.
Betty, what about that, like with Charles Kingsford Smith and the Southern Cross that you were telling me about?
I'm sorry.
Flight with Charles Kingsford Smith and the Southern Cross. Did you go for a flight with Charles Kingsford Smith?
Yes.
Bring it up.
My Dad and I, that was one of my sitting on his knee once. But he and Al, my cousin and I used to go with him. He at least had one where he could get inside. And the hair wasn't so bad when he finished.
How exciting. A lot of changes in the aviation industry.
Oh, and Mascot. Mascot was just Chinese vegetable gardens when we first went there, you know. But my mother wouldn't come to any of them. Her comment was, well, if we're going to lose the family, at least I'll be here.